welcome everyone. We're excited to have you here. So first of all, I'm Eller Mallchok. I'm the Managing Director of Jumpstart Foundry. I have with me our amazing COO, Brian Dougherty. We are going to be talking about managing startup goals using a method with OKRs, so objectives and key results. Beautiful. This is a new process that Brian was really familiar with coming into when he joined Jumpstart Foundry, something that I hadn't worked with previously, but we implemented over the last couple of months, and it's been an incredible system for us to launch new initiatives, improve processes that are already in place, and make sure that we're spreading out as much responsibility across the team in a really effective way. So it's something that we wanted to share with as many startups, entrepreneurs as possible. So I'm going to let Brian really walk through how to manage and implement OKRs. And then we're going to kind of go into a little back and forth of how it's really worked with Jumpstart, and then make sure we leave plenty of time for Q&A for anyone on the call. Without further ado, Brian, our COO, will let you take it from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Eller. So I'm Brian Dougherty, as Eller said, I'm the COO of Jumpstart, and I'm here to talk a little bit about OKRs. So this is the second organization I've been at where we have implemented OKRs. So I've been doing this for a few years, about 2 years now. I got to give a lot of credit to my boss and CIO, WellPath, my previous organization, for putting me onto this. He recognized that we had a bit of a problem, finding the right things to focus on, and so he brought Measure What Matters to our attention by John Doerr. It's a book and kind of the Bible around OKRs. John Doerr is a very impressive individual. He's done it and applied OKRs in many successful companies, everywhere from Intel to Google, and it's an excellent read. So this webinar is short, but if you want to have a really good read that's simple but will teach you everything you need to know, pick up a copy of Measure What Matters. So why do you need a goal management framework? We'll look at a couple of opinions from some of the thought leaders in the industry over the last 30 years. So Steve Jobs said, innovation means saying no to 1,000 things, right? Then you have Larry Page, who said that you should put more wood behind fewer arrows. And then finally, in this hall of masterminds, we have our own Gabe Lawrence, our research analyst for Jumpstart, who within the first week or two of me joining, Gabe was known for being very straightforward, which is one of his most amazing qualities, made it clear that at Jumpstart, we were trying to do too much shit. So based on that, it became really apparent that it's not a skill gap or anything like that with the organization. It's like it is with any startup, right? It's time management and making sure you're putting your time towards the most appropriate things, right? Time is by far the most restrictive asset for any startup because it's the most difficult to kind of alter, right? If you're looking for money, there's ways to get more money or do more with less or reshape things. But when it comes to time, you're limited. So there's only so many hours in the day and so many things you can focus on and really do a good job with. So how do you go about figuring out what are the most critical things for your organization to focus on, and then make sure that you're executing on them appropriately to make the best use of the little time you have? So the big idea is figuring out what is a clear way to figure out what initiatives and tasks do you say, yes, we're going to do this and do it right, and which things do you say, no, we're not going to do this. And no might be, we're not going to do this right now, or we're going to wait on doing it, or it might mean, this just is never going to be appropriate for what we're trying to do as an organization. So there's many benefits of OKRs, or objectives and key results. One of the biggest is enforcing a clarity of why across the organization, right? Too often it's easy to think, as management, that if you just basically put together a mission and a vision statement, that everybody in your organization is immediately just going to understand how that connects to their day-to-day work, and what their task should be to advance that forward. And that is almost never the case. Further, as your organization grows and scales, and you get more and more folks involved, you have this need to have this common understanding of why you're doing what you're doing horizontally across the organization. Your finance team and your marketing team and your IT team might be doing very different things, but it's really important to understand how all of that contributes to a common goal. So that way they know, when to work with other folks, when to ask the right questions, so everybody's, converging to the same point that you want to get to. KPIs, I'm a huge fan of. I've always heard that, the first step to changing something is to begin measuring it. And a great way to do that is with KPIs, or key performance indicators. But without any context, key performance indicators can be completely soul-sucking, right? If you're running a software team and your QA department's goal is to have 99% test coverage, that's pretty boring, right? But if you have some concept of how having 99% or 100% test coverage contributes to the end user and the mission the end user is trying to accomplish, you can actually start getting some joy out of life. OKRs help you do that by being certain that everything everyone's doing is contributing to the overall mission and objectives of your organization. Next is priority, right? Everybody is always going to have more initiatives available than they can take on a given day. So it's really important to be able to have some management framework to go through and decide, this is what we're doing, this is what we're not doing, and have everybody on the same page with that. So people are secure, they're doing the right things, confident, and are getting the joy out of doing them. And finally, and this is one of my favorite parts of OKRs, because I'm a swing for the fences kind of guy, is finding out what you can do, right? One of the key components of the OKR framework is you're not playing it safe, right? When you set goals, you're setting stretch goals that, that if you complete 70% of, that's considered a win, right? And that's kind of counterintuitive to many high achievers that have always thought that if I don't complete 100% of every task, then I'm coming up short. This allows you to set your sights higher and kind of have the freedom and confidence that your organization will buy into you going for it, and not come down on you in the event that you fail.
And I think that's a really important thing. I mean, for a lot of entrepreneurs, CEOs, founders, they want their achievement oriented, they want to complete things. It took me like a minute to be okay with, 75% is okay. I'm a 110% kind of person. And Brian knows that, all right, you got to kind of shift your mindset, and it allows you to reach for really lofty goals, so that 75% is actually a huge win. So
exactly. I mean, you're never going to get stronger in the weight room if you lift the same weights every week, right? And
yep.
But so much of corporate America in particular, kind of pushes that mindset, right? Security is important, and you're secure if you're meeting 100% of your goals. But really, in my opinion, that's kind of phoning it in. So what OKRs are not, just like anything else, they're not self-sufficient, right? You actually have to buy into them, and buy into them completely, in my opinion, to be successful with them. In the same way that buying a gym membership doesn't make the weight fall off of you. I'm a good example of that. You actually have to commit and execute and do something with that membership. And in this case, when you adopt the framework, it can't be something you give lip service to once a month or once a week. Everybody has to be bought in to the core tenets of, going for it, supporting each other, and really collaborating on it. If you've got a rogue group that doesn't buy in, it can make things extremely difficult. As Eller mentioned, OKRs are not a weapon, right? By design, they're not tied to compensation. Your bonus or your comp should not be dependent upon whether or not you achieve your OKRs, right? They should not come up in performance reviews, right? This isn't, you are not, measured by these. You should be free to take risk and aim high with them. And finally, it's not the only thing you'll ever need, right? There's tons of management frameworks and management tools. We use, a combination of several of them, right? But I would say that OKRs are definitely a pillar of our strategy for goal management and accomplishing goals in our organization. And it's been very, very effective. but there's other things you're going to need in your toolbox. For instance, we combined our OKR tracker with RASI matrices and capability maturity models, to get benefits of all of them. And that's really done well with us. So how does it work? So an objective is a description of a goal to be achieved in the future, right? And the point of that is to figure out, where do you want to go, right? This is high level, but it sets the basis for where you want to get to. A key result is a metric with a starting value and target value that is measurable. Very, very key word there, measurable. And if done correctly, is measurable in black and white, right? It's very clear on whether or not you are achieving it or to what extent you're achieving that key result. And really it's used as a signpost to let you know, are you making progress towards your objective and how close you are to completing it? So it's, more of how do you know if you're getting there? And then initiatives, right? Initiatives are the work that you're actually going to complete to try to achieve those key results and objectives. So that's what action are you actually taking to move there. So objectives and key results kind of go against the old school authoritarian, management business organization where everything comes from top down. It's if the executive team can go and put together a list of tasks that needs to be done and then just give those tasks to everybody, then, everything will just work. And that just doesn't work in my experience, right? It's really important for your entire staff to understand the why and to have buy-in, because for several reasons, right? One is management doesn't know everything, no matter, despite the fact we like to imply sometimes that we do. And as part of being a manager, with each passing day, you're getting farther and farther out of the details, right? And details are important, right? We can try to simplify, we can try to pull everything up to, something that's simple and attainable. But the farther you go down in an organization, the more specific in an organization, the more those details matter. So it makes sense for the folks that actually understand the work best to have a large say in the definition of how we go about accomplishing it, right? That's how you get the most out of your talent. And, your team is great at what they do, right? There are many things in the organization that either I can't do super well anymore, or I could never do super well, but I'm still accountable for making sure it's done successfully. So, I've got to be able to wave and, allow the folks that understand the job to, to define the path forward. And OKRs really lends itself to that. So how do we do it? So we define OKRs at a company and business unit level. We celebrate them often and provide transparent awareness. We grade them immediately when complete or a deadline is reached. That way you get that burst of joy for completing it, or if something slipped, we can respond very quickly and determine how to correct it. We use that feedback to create new OKRs, and we just keep that cycle going, right? So everybody's very aware and intentional about the work they're doing, and that should be driven by the work you've done up to that date, rather than just every quarter, or every week, or every day, starting anew and hopefully something works this time. So one of the big things from the last quarter at Jumpstart is what worked and what hasn't. So Eller, I'll let you start out and talk a little bit about your experience and where we came up short and what we've done to kind of correct that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, at Jumpstart, making sure that we have a very clear timeline and for setting OKRs, when are we going to start OKRs, when are we going to end that round of them, and then also accounting for the time it takes to plan, the time it takes to do kind of an assessment and kind of a looking back, how did everything go? And so you can set your timeline or time frame for OKRs to whatever you want them to be, whether it's by quarter, 3 months, 6 months. But you have to know that you're planning objectives and activities and key results that you want to achieve over that set period of time. And so what we did, kind of did it on a quarter basis, and we had some really great OKRs and key results. The first time we reached a lot of them, we missed some of them. And I think what was really important this last go around was making sure we actually set aside about a week, really 2 weeks, to do kind of a retrospective on what worked, what didn't, and then give ourselves plenty of time to plan what what our new OKRs are going to be. And then giving ourselves a little bit of flexibility in that, okay, we're going to plan OKRs for the next 3-4 months. So this is going to take up, a significant amount of time of our day to day. And giving ourselves, again, that flexibility to add OKRs maybe 3 months in, building off of previous OKRs, et cetera, but also making sure that we're actively and constantly reflecting on how we're making progress towards achieving those OKRs.
I've been guilty of this in pretty much anything revolving like sprints and planning. I've managed agile software teams, and I continually step into this. When you're up against the end of a sprint and you're scrambling to get everything done and meet your commitments and get everything delivered, right? The last thing you want to do is plan. And even if you go to the meetings, you're not thinking about it correctly. So it's so important to have that time, which is a break from full-on sprint and execution, to actually do that planning. Otherwise, you don't put the time into it, and you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So that's something that, again, I screwed up here and we correct it. And I think our OKRs going into Q2 are much more, are in a good shape, and they're very well planned, and we're ready to, jump on them quick. Another piece is defining deliverables. So the OKR framework really just calls for objectives. We are going key results, measurable things of are you getting there. What we found is, it's important to have a well-defined deliverable associated with those key results. So you might have a key result that says, we're going to analyze an existing process and design a new one. Well, that's fantastic, but what does that mean, right? Is the deliverable a charter for a new initiative? Is it is it just a business analyst spreadsheet of all the tasks with a RASI matrix attached to it, right? Especially when you have OKRs that are being shared across multiple people within an organization, it's important that everybody's on the same page of what those deliverables are.
So that was a big thing for me, Brian, was, okay, I've got to do this thing, but what do I need to show for it? Is it a document? Is it a gap analysis? And I think if you can really define that and kind of attach a deliverable to every, key result that you have, you're going to be incredibly successful. And then, as Brian said, on top of that deliverable, if you're pulling in multiple people in the team to work on that key result, layer in a RASI model, which is absolutely something we can talk about in a future webinar, but assigning who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, and who's informed. So without going too far into that, it's really, you can kind of build on top of this OKR framework to make sure that you're actually getting the work done, and it's really clear what the deliverable is and who's responsible for getting that across the finish line.
Absolutely. Another one is status tracking and presentation, right? OKRs are not something you do once a quarter, then, and have a good kumbaya moment, and then revisit a quarter later, right? It's so important to be tracking the status of OKRs and empowering your team to track their own statuses and update that themselves so it scales. And then presenting that status report on a very regular basis. Some folks said they do it once a month. I think that's too rare. We present ours every week, usually twice a week, on Monday and on Friday, just so everybody's aware of where we're at with it. That's how you celebrate it. That's how you can tell when you need to help out, a team member, when somebody's coming up short or might need some assistance from a management standpoint. It just, it keeps it it keeps it in front of everybody. Otherwise, folks start to veer off of it, and all of a sudden you've got people working on things that don't really aren't related to OKRs and probably aren't related to your mission as an organization.
Yep.
This is a really important one as we've really adopted OKRs across our entire team, is cross-team resource allocation recognition. I built out a Gantt chart that basically takes all of the members of our organization, and so you can see who is accountable and responsible for which OKRs, and then see where there's overlap. It can be really easy to just kind of focus on the work that that you want to do and not realize the work that other people are expecting on you to help with. And then you end up at a point where you're completely over allocated. So having a mechanism to understand who's working on which OKRs and who's contributing to them in a way that can be seen to where that overlap is in respect to when the work's being done is really important. Otherwise, you end up with folks over allocate it, and you're just not going to be successful, or you're going to burn people out, which will ultimately be even a worse problem. Eller, you want to talk a little bit about not ignoring the obvious work?
Yeah, so this is something that we ran into kind of in our last round of OKRs. Again, OKRs are meant to be lofty, exciting goals, but you shouldn't. I think what we really ran into is we planned so many great OKRs and exciting, lofty work to do, but we in some ways ignored kind of the obvious work that needed to get done, things that we do every single year. So for an example for Jumpstart is, our full on deal sourcing process. When we're reaching out to entrepreneurs and reaching out to great companies to apply for funding, that's something we do every year. We know it's a huge lift on our part. It's a really important part of our business. And we have goals around that every year. We didn't build that into one of our OKRs because we were, improving other parts of the business or adding new things. And so some of the OKRs, that were really lofty just didn't receive attention because of course we're going to be focused on, deal sourcing. It's what we do every year. And so if you can build in the obvious work into your OKRs, it again avoids that risk of burning people out, giving people too much on their plate. And so making sure that if you are adding in kind of the work that is going to get done or needs to get done anyway, and adding some lofty goals to that can be really, really helpful. So
I think I'll go just add one thing to that, right? The other thing is the obvious work you're doing for a reason. And it's really easy to forget that there's ways to improve it, right? Mm-hmm. When you're adding those to your OKRs, it's very easy to say, okay, let's have really clearly defined goals on the obvious stuff, right? And that really starts the conversation for, let's just not do this. Let's think really practically as we do it, what can we do to make it better? Mm-hmm. Which is really important, right? So that's another thing we found, but it's really easy just to go, let's think about all the, lofty, what can we do to make this all perfect? And then, forget about your day-to-day. And that leads to over allocation and problems.
Yeah.
All right. So I can talk about OKRs for days. I'd highly recommend picking up the book to go through some, examples and learn more about your organization, but we don't have time for that. But we do have time for some Q&A. So what do we got?
So if anyone has questions, submit them through the Q&A feature down at the bottom of your screen, and I can field those questions. Not a question, but we've got someone tuning in from Los Angeles who loves we're trying to do too much shit quote from Gabe, which I appreciate. I mean, I think, again, every founder, every entrepreneur experiences this. It's a reason we get up in the morning and are excited about investing in early stage startups, is that you all are trying to do a lot of stuff. And what you just don't, what you want to avoid is trying to do too much stuff. And again, back to our last point, not focus on getting, the tangible day-to-day things done while also improving and growing. So it's a great
one of the things I kind of live by is, you don't want to be a person that's doing a lot of stuff. You want to be a person that's getting a lot of stuff done, right? Yeah. And it's too easy to spread yourself so thin trying to do 20 freaking things at once instead of doing 5 things and actually doing something to move the ball forward. And this really helps with that.
All right, so I've got a question here. Can you give an example of an OKR in practice? And so Brian, I think you, we may be able to show something or can give an example. So while you're pulling that up, I can answer the next one. Is there a minimum size company that this works in? I don't think so. I think you can use OKRs across any size organization. Again, you can use it for yourself, again, for setting those goals, and being very clear of, what is the objective for the next 3 months, quarter, 6 months, and then what very tangible key results that you need to reach in order to meet that objective.
Yeah, I think it works with one person and just gets exponentially more valuable every time you add a person, right? That's kind of my opinion on it. I've got pulled up here, Eller, if you want to talk about it, if you can see it.
Yeah.
One of the objectives and key results from Q1 for Foundry.
Awesome. Yeah. So this is kind of, again, this is a live example of an objective that I have. My objective for this year, and I'm having to kind of go a little closer to read it. Sorry.
All right.
And so really, my objective, design and begin implementation of a strategy to bring in new investor leads. So new LPs, limited partners, into our fund. That's a big goal. We want to do that. It's a really important thing to do. And so my key results are kind of very clearly outlined. I need to further define, 10 new sources for investor leads. Again, really important to have a date, kind of a goal date. So by May 29th. And then as you move across there, okay, what is the deliverable to that? Okay, I need to further define that, but how do I show that? How do I present that? And so it's kind of analyzing those 10 potential leads. I'm going to analyze all of those, and then I'm going to select the top 3 or 4 and let the team know what those top 3 or 4 that I'm going to work on. And then the KR2 kind of comes in, and I'm going to define an outreach strategy for those 3 or 4. And the deliverable on that is, a briefing on each of those strategies by June 5th. And so you can kind of go down and see how I've developed kind of the due date, start dates, due dates for each of those key results and the deliverables associated with each one. And then as we were talking about before, we've kind of built out a RASI model on top of this. So I'm ultimately accountable for this happening. So I'm on the hook if it doesn't happen. For some of them, I'm responsible for actually getting it done, actually producing that deliverable. In other examples, our marketing team, or Ashley Kent, who's also part of our marketing team, is responsible for making sure it gets done. And then there are people that we consult and keep informed. So Vic is always informed of what's going on. But I may need to ask people questions, other people on the team questions about best way of getting it done. So hopefully that's a good example to give you guys kind of how you can set up a full OKR built with a RASI model. Awesome. Great question. Okay, another question is there any software we use or recommend to help track and manage OKRs in a project or company? Brian, I'll let you take that one.
This is a great question. There are some products that are available from a SaaS perspective that will do everything from, giving you a mechanism for tracking them, as well as even provide training and support and coaching on whether or not you're setting them up correctly. It escapes me now, but our brand marketing manager directed me to one early this week. I think there are things that can be helpful, but to be honest with you, I always end up falling back to just an Excel or a Google Sheet for something simple. I think over the course of at the end of this year, we're going to really start analyzing to see what software solutions are available. But as we're implementing it, it's just, this is simple and it gets the job done.
Yeah. Okay, final question, because I want to try to make sure we end on time to respect everyone's schedules. Good question here. If you find that you and your team are trying to do too much, what's the best way to circle back and reassess your goals?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. The first thing is just pause and start at the very top and understand what are the objectives of your organization, right? At the highest level, what is it you're trying to do here? And that's part of what the OKR framework does. It forces you to define those at the highest level. So then everything below it can hierarchically can build theirs that drive off of it. That ensures you have that vertical alignment all the way to the top. So it's just going back, before we even do OKRs, I always start out with a very clear mission, vision, values, for whatever organization I'm in. So that kind of forces you to understand the why are we here? Why are we even doing this company? Why are we showing up each day? Because I'm a big believer that why is the key to everything. And then once you have your mission, vision, and values, you can say, okay, great. What are, 3 objectives that if we did these 3 objectives over the course of the next 3 months, 6 months, year, right, would help us to accomplish that mission, right, and help us move that vision forward.
Yeah.
Um,
And I would just add to that in that, be thoughtful about the timeline you pick to
Yeah.
create OKRs and assess them. Just so everyone knows, when you first implement this process, and our entire team ran up against this, is, we feel like we can do so much stuff. And Brian Allman, who commented here, great point, being busy is not being productive. And so we found like we put all of these, objectives and key results, and we were really excited about all of them. And we ended up missing a fair amount of them. And it can be very easy to feel like you didn't get it done or to feel defeated in that. But that, again, going back to create a timeline that makes sense for your team. So for us, after that quarter, some of us were disappointed that we didn't hit all of our OKRs. And again, training your brain and training yourself to say, that's okay. We set really lofty goals. How can we then change that for next quarter? How can we improve the OKRs that we set? And so I think not getting too lofty with, let's set OKRs for the year, because then you're going to kind of lock yourself into being unable to reassess and plan.
Your business is going to change. You got to respond to the feedback. It's supposed to be an agile framework. If one of my favorite things about the OKR framework is that if someone completes 100% of their goals, then that's more problematic than someone that completed 70% of them, right? Because you don't want people in an organization, they're going to sandbag, right? That just shows they're not understanding it. They're not pushing themselves. They're not, really adopting the framework. So that's something to look out for, right? Anybody that's on the 100% end or like 20% end, that's when there needs to be some intervention to say, okay, 20%ers, we're probably shooting too high, or you're not getting the support and, help you need to be successful. 100%ers, quit phoning it in, right? Let's figure out how to take this and go even further.
Yeah. I have 2 more great questions that just came in. I'm going to go ahead and ask them again, because we're recording this and we can send it out later. But if anyone needs to jump, I'm going to take this point here just to say thank you so much for joining. Again, we'll send out the final recording directly to your inbox, and appreciate everyone really thoughtful questions. So if you need to jump, great to have you here. But without further ado, I'm going to answer these or let Brian and myself answer these final 2 questions. So question here is, I run a service organization and metrics are hard to set. What are some examples you have seen regarding OKRs for service businesses versus, say, a product business?
Yeah, I mean, granted, there's a big difference between service and product businesses, but, there's many things that are still the same, right? You have burn and you have spend, right? You have customer acquisition and customer engagement. You have quality of service that you're concerned about, right? Are you providing high quality services to individuals? What markets are you attacking, and are you expanding? There's all types of things like that really are independent of your product or even your business model, that you can look into.
And I would say even the OKR that we pulled up here is my example, one of my OKRs. I mean, that's in some ways a very, service oriented OKR. I'm engaging new potential investors for our fund. So I'm not necessarily selling them a hard product. I'm selling them a potential service of, our investments and where am I going to find them? So it's, for you all, it might be, how are you going to do better lead generation, and where are you going to find those people, and how are you going to outreach to them? And so setting OKRs around that.
Yeah, I mean, in implementation of your service, right? I mean, that's always a huge one, right? Are you doing everything to make sure the implementations of your service is going well? Is it fast enough? Is it efficient enough? Is it cost effective enough? Is it of high enough quality, right? There's many, many, many metrics across any type of organization that once you start thinking about, all right, what really matters to my customer, and what really matters to me, and what really matters to my staff, and what really matters to my shareholders, you're gonna have some things to look at. So the real way to get back at that is just to start kind of with your KPIs which, the OKR framework can really, be designed to help drive those and figure out what are the key performance indicators for, are you doing well as a business, right? Some of those will be financial, some of those will be cultural, some of those will be, customer driven, but figuring those out are key.
And I think that really leads into the last question very well, which is, where do you suggest starting to implement OKRs?
Yeah. I mean, there's different schools of thought on that, right? One way is to start with a smaller team, right? So it might just be start with your executive team, and just work to get everybody on the same page there and have them all running in the same direction. And then gradually start bringing that down throughout your organization, right? So then, your executive team does it, and then your middle management, your vice presidents, and your directors, then they adopt it. And then eventually that gets down all the way to, entry-level employees having a hand in that.
And again, if you start it at kind of the executive level, you're creating OKRs for yourself and your executive team. You're not creating OKRs that you then assign people.
Right.
You're creating them for yourself. Just to be.
Then you're celebrating them. Then you're celebrating them to your team, right? It's, hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's what we're doing to make sure as an executive team we're staying on track. Here's how we're going about accomplishing them. And even then, if your subordinates aren't, using the OKR framework, I guarantee you everybody's going to be very happy to say, wow, they're really thinking intentionally and strategically about this. They're measuring themselves. We now have a common understanding of we're all going in the same direction, right? Nothing will make people work harder for you than understanding the why and being bought into it. And that's a really good way to do it. Don't feel like you've got to drop this across your entire organization at once for it to be successful, right? On the flip side, you can also go the other way with it, right? If you just have your team or your department, feels like they need this, then start there, right? Get that entire unit on the same page. And then, as other folks see your success and see how much more productive you're being and how you're all, singing from the same hymnal, then they're going to take notice of that and want to adopt something similar, right? And then you'll see it start to spread throughout the organization. So there's not really a wrong way to do it. The key is that wherever you start, do everything you can to get everybody to have buy-in with it, right? You want that whole group to be committed to it, or it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy from naysayers.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to be reporting on my OKRs here that are coming up, due the end of May. I'm going to be reporting on those today after we get off of this webinar in our Jumpstart kind of Friday sync. And I'm also going to be reporting on them kind of on Monday. Okay, here's what I'm going to be working on over the next week with various team members to make progress on OKRs. So with that, we might just end it there. Great questions from everyone. If you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to send them our way. Best way to get in contact with us is right through our website, contact@jsf.co. Amazing. I always like to give everyone a little bit of insight that goes to our marketing team, but it also comes directly to my and Brian's inboxes as well. So you know that, you heard it here. We are paying attention to all of your questions. Thank you all for joining. We hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. And we'll be back with some more great content on how startups can create lofty goals, manage them, and manage their teams to reach them. So thank you all for joining. Brian, thank you for walking through all of this, and we'll be back next time.